NATO's top military officials have provided a chilling forecast, suggesting that such a conflict could occur by 2044. This projection, made in January 2024 during a NATO Military Committee meeting in Brussels, suggests up to 2 decades of escalating tensions, brinkmanship, and the looming threat of war. Macron's subsequent statements have only exacerbated the fragile relationship between Russia and NATO, making the prospect of a clash seem more imminent. Russia has ominously warned that such a conflict would be a precursor to World War III, intensifying the sense of foreboding that envelops the international community. This ominous potentiality has compelled all NATO members to reevaluate their strategic foresight and contingency frameworks. Just recently, in December 2023, German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius cautioned that Germany might have a mere 5 to 8 years to ready itself for the next significant conflict. However, with the current trajectory of events, this window could shrink to as little as 5 to 8 months. How have we reached this precarious juncture? Is Macron's declaration the sole catalyst for the seemingly unavoidable and imminent NATO-Russia confrontation? Absolutely not. It is but one of many strategic maneuvers that have led us to this perilous impasse, where even a minor miscalculation could result in catastrophic repercussions. Move number 1. After nearly 2 years of relentless combat, Ukraine appears to be teetering on the edge of defeat. Such a loss would trigger a cascade of turmoil and conflict. NATO would suffer a significant blow to its credibility, while Putin would become more audacious. This shift in power dynamics would leave Europe vulnerable to Russian influence. How did we find ourselves in this predicament? Ukraine was initially lauded for its valiant defense against a far superior adversary. However, sheer resolve and asymmetrical warfare can only achieve so much. Substantial resources are indispensable, especially as the aggressor continuously escalates its commitment. So where are these crucial resources for Ukraine? They remain ensnared in bureaucratic red tape and a political quagmire of blame and inaction. This is particularly evident in the United States, which has been the principal benefactor to Ukraine since the invasion's inception. Yet the latest aid package from the U.S. faced a 6-month delay due to staunch opposition from Republican lawmakers. For Ukraine, this delay was agonizing, as the city of Avdiivka succumbed to Russian forces, resulting in the loss of approximately 7,000 Ukrainian lives. This defeat echoed beyond the city, suggesting a potential shift in favor of Russia. Fortuitously, the $61 billion aid package was eventually sanctioned in April 2024. The survival of the Ukrainian state hinged on a vote occurring in the U.S. House of Representatives, located some 5,000 miles away. This package is anticipated to include air defense systems, mid- and long-range missiles, and artillery shells, assets Ukraine has desperately sought in recent months. This support should empower Ukraine to contest Russia's air dominance and slow the advance of Russian troops, who have recently seized vast swaths of Ukrainian territory. The prevailing sentiment in Ukraine is one of better late than never. Nonetheless, some analysts ponder whether this aid has arrived too tardily. But the U.S., while the most substantial contributor, is not the sole benefactor. What of the European nations that have steadfastly supported Ukraine? What of Germany, France, and the United Kingdom? Herein lies the issue of the political squabbling and recrimination we previously mentioned. These nations are at the forefront of these futile yet intense deliberations. So what is the crux of the matter? The problem lies in the disparity between the aid pledged and delivered by each NATO member. The consensus is that France's contributions fall short. These criticisms emerged after the German think tank, the Kiel Institute, published the Ukraine Support Tracker, which tallied all the military, financial, and humanitarian aid sent to Ukraine. According to the Kiel Institute, over just more than 2 years, the U.S. alone provided $72 billion in aid to Ukraine. European countries collectively donated almost $100 billion. However, the issue arises from the breakdown of these European contributions. Germany leads with $11 billion in military aid, $3 billion in humanitarian aid, and $1.5 billion in financial aid. The UK follows with $5.7 billion in military aid, $600 million in humanitarian aid, and $3.5 billion in financial aid. Then, several spots down the list, we find France. To date, France has contributed nearly $3 billion in military aid, $400 million in humanitarian aid, and $870 million in financial aid. Given that France boasts the third largest economy in Europe, trailing only Germany and the UK, its contributions to Ukraine are seen as modest at best. Yet the primary issue isn't the aid amount, but the disparity between President Macron's grandiose promises and the subsequent lack of substantial action. This discrepancy prompted German Chancellor Olaf Scholz to instruct European officials to compile lists of planned weapon shipments to Ukraine in January 2024, aiming to pressure underperforming countries. Scholz criticized these contributions as too small and urged European allies to step up their efforts in support for Ukraine. Polish Minister of Foreign Affairs Radosław Sikorski went further, suggesting that some nations avoided involvement in the Ukraine conflict out of fear and indifference, willing to sacrifice other people's land or freedom for their own peace of mind. Although Italy and Spain, two of Europe's largest economies, faced similar criticism, France bore the brunt due to the gap between its promises and actions. France countered the accusations, arguing that the Kiel Institute's estimates were neither trustworthy nor viable. French Minister of the Armed Forces, Sébastien Lecornu, accused Germany of hesitating to send the crucial long-range Taurus KPD 350 missiles, while France pledged around 40 of these vital missiles to aid Ukraine's defenses. Germany faced additional criticism for allegedly attempting to act unilaterally, pledging over $7 billion in aid for Ukraine. The situation is clear. Europe's largest economies are locked in escalating disputes, and Ukraine is poised to bear the cost. While NATO's key players engage in political squabbling and delay aid, Russia seems to thrive. Russia's 2024 military budget has soared to a record $140 billion, indicating that roughly one-third of all government spending is allocated to defense. This signifies Russia's commitment to a prolonged conflict, raising fears of a broader war in Europe. Russia's intentions to conscript an additional 300,000 personnel in 2024 only amplify these apprehensions. If Russia can seemingly replenish its lost forces and materiel with astonishing swiftness, Ukraine's prospects of triumphing in this conflict look bleak. And should Ukraine succumb, a confrontation between Russia and NATO becomes almost inevitable. The reasoning is straightforward. Putin is unlikely to halt his advances at Ukraine alone. Military analysts assert he already has his gaze set on subsequent targets, the Baltic states. Even if the Ukraine war does not directly trigger a NATO-Russia clash, the aftermath likely will, provided Russia emerges victorious. So what is Putin's scheme? In essence, it is to reclaim former Soviet territories now within NATO's fold. Move number 2 on our strategic board: the Baltic states, Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia. They are first in line for 3 primary reasons. Firstly, they house significant Russian-speaking demographics, which Putin could exploit to justify intervention under the guise of protecting Russian nationals abroad, akin to his tactics in Crimea and eastern Ukraine. Secondly, Ukraine's downfall would leave these nations exposed, rendering all of Eastern Europe vulnerable to Russian advances. Lastly, these nations possess limited military capabilities independently, making them relatively easy prey for a rejuvenated Russian military. Moreover, Putin would not tolerate complete encirclement by NATO countries in Europe, a reality solidified when Finland and Sweden joined NATO after prolonged neutrality. Although Russia's response was predominantly rhetorical, this development undeniably edged the nation closer to future armed conflict with NATO, a strategic move number 3. This scenario culminates with one more significant move, not directly involving Russia, Ukraine, or any European nation. This pivotal move hinges on the outcome of the 2024 U.S. presidential election. Former President Donald Trump, vying for re-election, has long criticized NATO, primarily over the U.S. shouldering the bulk of NATO's budget, while other member nations struggle to meet the 2% GDP defense spending target. He even suggested allowing Russia to do whatever the hell they want to nations not meeting their contributions. This stance indicates that Trump's re-election could precipitate an all-out war sooner than expected. Should he reduce the US's involvement in NATO or withdraw entirely, turning a blind eye to the tribulations of other member states, Putin would face minimal resistance. As this critical countdown advances, potentially ticking toward a NATO-Russia conflict, a crucial question arises. How will this conflict commence? We need not speculate extensively, as a leaked German wargame document offers a vivid depiction. While NATO publicly distances itself from this war plan, describing it as a hypothetical scenario to test military capabilities in a specific area, the German Ministry of Defense's confidential document seems alarmingly realistic given the current European climate. Moreover, it provides an updated timeline, suggesting that an all-out war in Europe looms closer than anticipated. According to the German Ministry of Defense, the first chain in the sequence leading to war will be Russia's large-scale mobilization of new military forces, enabling it to significantly undermine Ukrainian positions in the coming months. The subsequent phase involves Russia's expertise in hybrid warfare, strategies in the gray zone that Russia has perfected. These could include recruiting asylum seekers as spies, provoking migrant crises to strain an enemy's resources, covertly supporting political movements to create internal discord, launching cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, and using information warfare to disseminate propaganda and disinformation. In Europe, Moscow would likely direct these hybrid strategies at the Baltic states, inciting unrest among Russian-speaking minorities to fabricate a pretext for intervention. However, Russia would refrain from immediate intervention, initially using the Baltic crisis to justify a large-scale military exercise akin to Zapad 2021. This joint exercise with Belarus involved approximately 200,000 military personnel and substantial equipment, seen by some as a rehearsal for the Ukraine invasion. Similarly, a hypothetical Zapad 2024 exercise would set the stage for an assault on the Baltic states and, consequently, NATO. Despite Russia's depleted resources from the Ukraine conflict, Germany anticipates at least 50,000 Russian troops in Belarus and Western Russia. Nevertheless, Russia would delay an attack, instead propagating the narrative that NATO is the aggressor. As NATO members justifiably raise alarms over Russia's maneuvers, Russia would discreetly move additional forces and armaments to Belarus in the Kaliningrad enclave, situated between Lithuania and Poland, both NATO members and potential Russian targets. These two countries also share the Suwalki Gap, a critical 60-mile land corridor termed the most dangerous place on Earth, and NATO's weak spot in Eastern Europe. Control of the Suwalki Gap would grant strategic leverage over NATO's eastern flank, a prize Russia covets. Hence, seizing the Suwalki Gap becomes a priority for Russia. Nonetheless, according to the German war plan, direct actions would await the U.S. presidential election outcome. Putin is banking on Trump's victory, which could plunge the U.S. into chaos for several months, providing Russia the ideal opportunity to instigate border conflicts around the Suwalki Gap. Subsequent violent riots would ensue, justifying Russia's intervention, a tactic reminiscent of its actions in Ukraine in 2022. This intervention would necessitate deploying more troops and equipment to the Suwalki Gap. The German war plan estimates 70,000 Russian troops in Belarus, along with 2 tank divisions, a mechanized infantry division, and a deployable headquarters near NATO borders. In this scenario, NATO would find itself with no choice but to approve measures for credible deterrence to prevent Russia's invasion of the Baltic states and Poland. These measures would likely involve deploying at least 300,000 troops to the region, including 30,000 Bundeswehr soldiers. Although intended as a deterrent strategy, such a move would probably lead to the all-out war we've been discussing. This suggests that a major war in Europe could start as early as 2025. Despite NATO distancing itself from this war plan, the alliance seems well aware of the possibility, which is why its annual military exercises have become more extensive than ever. Let's discuss Steadfast Defender 2024, NATO's largest military exercise since the Cold War, taking place from January 22nd to May 31st, 2024. These exercises began in 1951 to train and test NATO's newly established military structures, involving multiple nations, from the start to create an integrated military force under centralized command. Throughout the Cold War, NATO also tested its ability to rapidly deploy troops to Europe, which Steadfast Defender aims to achieve. The last comparable exercise was Reforger, Return of Forces to Germany, running from 1969 to 1993 with 125,000 participants. Steadfast Defender 2024 might have been shorter but almost matched a Reforger's scale, involving 90,000 troops from all 32 NATO allies. Among them were 20,000 from the UK, 15,000 from Poland, 10,000 from Germany, and 5,000 from the Netherlands. This exercise encompassed all military branches: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Special Operations Forces, and a vast array of military equipment. Over 80 air platforms, including the F-35 Lightning II, FA-18 Hornet, F-15 Eagle, Harrier helicopters, and drones were involved. Additionally, over 50 ships, including aircraft carriers, destroyers, frigates, and corvettes, and over 1,100 combat vehicles were deployed, making a significant show of military power. The exercise took place in Germany, Poland, and the Baltic states, achieving its objectives. The goals of Steadfast Defender were twofold. Firstly, to ensure NATO could secure the Euro-Atlantic area, focusing on live maritime exercises and amphibious assault training in the North Atlantic and Arctic seas. The U.S. forces started from Norfolk, Virginia, followed by Canadian forces from Halifax, Nova Scotia. Secondly, to ensure NATO could rapidly reinforce its eastern flank in response to potential aggression. This phase involved multi-domain exercises across Europe, emphasizing quick deployment of troops and equipment within NATO borders. One such exercise, Sabre Strike 2024, took place in the Baltics, training NATO forces for rapid deployment in cold weather conditions. Another critical exercise, Nordic Response in Norway, involved 20,000 troops, over 50 ships, and over 110 aircraft from over 14 countries, enhancing NATO's ability to secure the High North. The Brilliant Jump Test in Germany and Poland prepared the NATO response force to defend every inch of NATO territory, while Poland's Dragon 24 exercise trained 20,000 NATO troops, including 15,000 from the Polish Armed Forces, to respond to various threats. The sheer scale of Steadfast Defender sent a clear message. NATO is more united and determined than ever. The next phase for the alliance is to demonstrate the willingness to proportionally respond to Russian hybrid warfare attacks, showing that NATO can outmatch Russia on every front. Achieving this outcome will require significant efforts from NATO countries' industries, militaries, and their people. At the NATO Military Committee meeting in Brussels, the declaration of a potential future all-out war against Russia was discussed. Admiral Rob Bauer, chairman of the Military Committee, highlighted two crucial factors: the industrial base and the people. NATO countries must ramp up weapons production to replenish stockpiles depleted by the Ukraine war. The mobilization of people is equally important. Many civilians will need to support the war effort, necessitating systems to manage mobilization, especially given troop shortages in several NATO countries. For instance, the UK Armed Forces consist of 183,130 soldiers as of January 1, 2024, with numbers declining over recent years. Due to a shortage of sailors, the Royal Navy had to decommission 2 warships to staff new frigates. These situations are prompting calls for mandatory conscription, with some NATO members, like Latvia, already implementing it. The UK may follow suit if the ruling Conservative Party wins the national election in July, as promised by Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Top NATO officials also emphasize that civilians must prepare for war both mentally and physically. This includes assembling emergency kits with essentials like non-perishable food, water, medical supplies, a battery-powered radio, and a flashlight. In Sweden, the government's war preparation campaign caused a spike in sales of these items, albeit amid panic and controversy. The Swedish Minister for Civil Defense, Carl Oskar Bolin, bluntly stated, "There could be war in Sweden, leading to panic buying and overwhelming support hotlines." Although aggressive, this campaign had a correct premise: the need for preparation. The reality is that we all must accept a new reality sooner or later. Given the current trajectory, the sooner scenario appears more likely. Do you see an all-out war between NATO and Russia happening soon? If so, when? If you are more optimistic about Europe's future, please share your reasons in the comments.